All right, we're recording back with another guest interview. I'm liking doing these. I think I'm going to do them a bit more often. Today, very special guest, Gavin Adin. Welcome, my brother.
Thank you, man. Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here.
First, have to apologize because I've said your name live on podcasts or publicly many times, and I've been saying Gavin Adin this whole time, and
Good, bro.
because with I said this on the Colton podcast as well, like, and I mean it. I'm a fan of all of my lifters. It's a cool thing being like coach, but also lifter, but also meet director, but also gym owner. You get to wear different hats, and I'm a fan of you guys. So I've spent the last 2 weeks listening. Like, you've done some long podcasts, so I've listened to hours of you in the last couple of weeks, and only on one of them did I hear you say your own name, and I was like, I've been saying it wrong the whole time. But I'm guessing everyone says it wrong.
Dog, I have two first names, so people either spell it wrong, say it wrong. Sometimes it's not the last name, sometimes it's the first name. It's Kevin, it's Gavin, and sometimes it's all of it. So yeah, no, it's all good, man.
What do you? Oh, you're saying Aiden is a first name as well.
Yeah, most people would consider that to be like a first name because it's only 4 letters. It's
Ah,
short.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got lots of Aidens in Australia, but it's like Aiden. Anyway, this is not what the podcast is meant to be about. So, for those who don't know you, I want to do a little bit of an intro in terms of like how you got into powerlifting, how you found the sport, when you started, all of that sort of stuff. I mean, I don't want to spend the whole time on your life story because I've got a few banger questions and I want to kind of get deep with you on this podcast. But in general, like how did you get into powerlifting in the first place?
Yeah, I guess the short story is I had played mainstream sports like most people growing up, but going into college. So I would say I started training, like working out around 12 years old. And a lot of my training was simply to get better at sports. So the very first time I had personal trainers, I remember I had this like calisthenics personal trainer who refused to let me touch any weights because I was like 12 or 13. And excuse me. And I worked with him for about maybe 6 months or so, and just kind of like from there evolved, right? Like anybody else would. You learn different things, you start training in certain ways, and you develop yourself, and you become more and more involved, and you want to learn more, and et cetera, et cetera. So, again, long story short, I got involved in a lot of mainstream sports from middle school into high school. And so most of my training served sports, whether it was football, equestrian, polo, swimming, wrestling, whatever it was. And then going into college, I stopped playing mainstream sports. And I kind of, dude, like I was at this real weird inflection point because at the time my personal life was on the rocks. I mean, I was a freshman or sophomore in college. I had just transferred schools to Colgate University. And, man, I was just feeling like super alone. My relationship that I had at the time was really rocky. My grandmother was passing away and my aunt had just like, it was just a lot that was going on. And so the one thing I had was lifting and I loved to train, but I didn't have something to train for. So I kind of found myself like, what the fuck is my life? I literally was skipping final exams sometimes to go train. I was skipping studying, skipping tests, all this stuff just so that I could just train. I just love to train. But I had nothing to show for it. So I decided to become a world champion. And I didn't really know what it was going to be in. I just knew I had it in my blood and in my bones to become a world champion. And powerlifting just happened to be the vehicle. I remember I was sitting in the gym, looked up the records at the time. I thought I was an 83 kilo lifter, and I looked at the records. My total, unofficial, of course, was like call it 1,300 pounds, and the 83 kilo world champion, I think at the time was like 1,800 pounds was the world record total. So I was like, okay, cool. 2 years to put on basically like 200 to 300 pounds on my total each year. I could fucking do that, and then that's what started it. So I started powerlifting when I was 2019 was my first meet. So I had been training for about 7 to 8 years prior to that, but that was when I first started powerlifting.
Do you remember when you were looking at that 83 world record? Was that Brett Gibbs at the time or had Russell
Russell had
passed him
just
by?
overtaken him. Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, nice. And so you realized you were strong, you found powerlifting. Like how did you even stumble upon powerlifting in the first place? Was it just an awareness thing? Did you see something online and you're like, I could do that?
Yeah, well, dude, it's weird because like that was at a time when social media was just hitting the like, I would say hitting its stride. It wasn't at its peak yet. I don't even know if we're even seeing the peak just yet of social media, but I would definitely say it was hitting its stride. So at the time, YouTube was huge and Instagram was really popping off. So there were a couple of influencers who I saw. Russell Orhey was definitely one of them. Dawson Wyndham was another one. Sean Noriega was one. Ashton Ruska was one. And I was seeing all these guys, and I didn't really know them, and I didn't know powerlifting, but because I had been training my ass off for so long and had trained in so many disciplines. I mean, I did CrossFit, I did everything. Um, and then just before college slash a little bit into freshman year of college, I trained out of an Olympic weightlifting academy, and my goal was to go to the Olympics. So I was Ollie lifting. I was around that culture. Um, and when I transferred schools, it just wasn't feasible for me to Olympic weightlift anymore. I mean, I don't know if you know much about Ollie lifting, but dude, some of these workouts are like 3 hours, and it's just like 20 doubles, with snatches, and you don't do anything else. So I was like, I can't fucking do this. So I needed something. I was like power building at the time, and a lot of the guys that I was watching were all power lifters. They were competing, but truthfully, man, like I don't know if I really gave a shit about the sport. Like I just saw it as a way to become a world champion. That's all I cared about. So I would say that's where I saw powerlifting. When I was Olympic weightlifting, I knew it was there. I knew it existed, but it wasn't until I got to college and I literally just remember questioning. I was sitting in the car. It was hailing outside, freezing cold. I didn't turn it on. I just sat there and I just thought to myself, like, I need to do something. I need to do something with my life. I need to become something. I know I'm worth more. What the fuck is that vehicle going to be? And that's when I just thought about, okay, powerlifting. I love to train. I want to see how strong I am. I want to push myself. Let's see what we can do. And so then that's when I looked up the records for powerlifting.
Yeah, cool. I like that. You've mentioned a couple of times already, it was a vehicle towards being a world champion, and what everyone's going to see this podcast evolve into, like the theme I want to make this is basically greatness. I want to have a long conversation around greatness. Before we get there, though, just to add to it, um, how long between starting doing your first competition and winning a world championships was that? Like, what was your journey from there? And for the people who don't know you, like, lay out some of the highlights along the way, including the biggest comps, the best lifts, that kind of.
So you mean from the start to where we are now or from the start to that world championship?
The start to the world championship. Let's start with that.
So my first world championship was a junior world championship. I only had, I want to say it was maybe three meets or four. It might have been four. I forget. Three or four meets
We can
between,
verify.
yeah, between my first meet and Sweden. So my first meet was New Jersey State's. Wasn't going in expecting much. I didn't know anything about weight classes or anything like that. I ended up actually getting really lucky that the meet director just let me like automatically register for the weight class up because I realized like I'm not going to make 83. I was like 192 or something like that at the time. So in kilos, I think that's just under 90. Um, so I got lucky, went 93, and I ended up winning. I ended up placing first, which I really went in with zero expectations. And I forgot what I totaled. I think it was something around like 1607 or maybe slightly less, something like that. I don't know what that is in kilos. Um, but
727.5.
Okay. Yeah. So 727 and a half. And then that qualified me for nationals. So then I did my first national championship in Chicago and only registered for the juniors. I was still a junior at this time. And I ended up placing like fifth in the juniors, I think. And then what would have been like 15th overall in the open. I think my total went up maybe like, I don't even know, maybe 60 pounds, something like that, 50, 60 pounds. So not a huge increase. But then COVID hit. So I had a nice chunk of time to just put my nose to the fucking pavestone and just grind, and just get really sweaty, really bloody with it. And I had the time of my life doing that. It's because, I was still in school, but I was kind of finishing up like my last year and I was home, so it's like my classes were online and all I did was just train. I was just training in my basement. I was blessed to have that space. I had some friends who had the equipment. They brought it over and I was like, listen, you can train here if I can use your equipment. And so that was kind of how we made the deal. And it just worked out, man. So for like a year or a year and a half or something like that, I forget how much time had passed, but I had then basically just trained into a meet called Miami Vice, which was in Miami. That was a local meet. And I don't remember what I totaled there. I think it was like 830. I think I did 830. And I think I remember that because at the time it was close to what Chance Mitchell was doing in the 83s or 93s, something like that, which was like a big deal. But I still couldn't appreciate that. So I thought it was cool, but I was super excited to go into nationals. So fast forward, went to nationals it was like either Daytona or Orlando. And this time I competed in the open. I had no idea what I was going to total. I had no idea who I was going up against, what the competition was, whatever. I didn't really care. I kind of was just like, fuck it. Like, I just want to go out and ball out. So I ended up totaling 880, I think there. And that I lost by a pound to the number 193 in the world, who, Keiko has won multiple world championships since then and stuff. And so that earned me my
Wait, wait.
spot for Worlds.
You lost by a pound on body weight, or he had chipped something
No, he
and
chipped
beat you by
something.
a pound?
Yeah, he chipped something.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did he chip the bench?
No, I think it was the deadlift that came down to the final pull.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just on that, like, what do you think about that? So, IPF is quite unique in that most other federations, when you chip something for a record, like an individual lift record, it doesn't count towards the total. And IPF is quite unique in that, where he can chip a deadlift for a record, um, and then beat you on the total. Uh, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't know if I really care that much. Like it's one of those things where I think give credit where credit is due, in that of course it should count towards your total. If you did 390.5, then count 390.5. But where it becomes an issue is our increments that we're allowed to go up in. So like I don't know the exact specifics of it. You would know better than I would. But the reason why the chip advantage is so deadly at like Worlds is because it forces me to take a bigger jump than I normally would, because I can't take I can't take an uneven number, whatever the fucking, you know what I'm talking about. I can't go
Sure.
3 kilos. I have to go 2.5 or 5, right? So as a result of that, I can't. It kind of puts me in a corner. It's like, shit, if you have a chip from, let's say, your world record bench, now all of a sudden I have to respond and potentially pull something that I, don't have. So in that regard, it's a little frustrating, but I mean, like it's sport, you're talking about a matter of what would be like a couple kilos, which I know to a lot of people and a lot of coaches, like that could be everything, which it is. But my mindset is like, well, why don't I just be strong enough to lift a couple more kilos? You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I'm the same. I kind of see both sides of the coin. I've been frustrated as a coach. I've seen the value and the flaws as a lifter and a meet director as well. One thing that stands out big time, I was coaching at an IPF. Can't remember if it was an Oceanias or an Asia Pacific champs, and my lifter got beaten by zero point 0.5 of a kilo, which is the smallest jump you can take. But the person who beat him had chipped a record, a regional record. They were allowed to chip like a national record, which was much lower than, sorry, they'd chipped a national record, which was much lower than the regional record.
Mm.
So my lifter couldn't over chip, even though he was deadlifting more than him, he couldn't chip it. And then he lost out because of it. That was a frustrating situation. But I hear what you're saying, man. At the end of the day, it's like you lifted the weight.
What I'll
But
say,
yeah.
I hate to like what I will say is, if there was a list of things I would change or modify in the sport of powerlifting, from rules to regulations to whatever, that's on the list, but I would put that at like 10, because I know that there's like 9 other things at least that I'm like, those things need to be addressed. So it's definitely something
Yeah,
that's worth
well,
thinking about.
we're going to do Q&A at the end, and maybe we'll start with that. I want to hear some of the things that are on the list of things Gavin would change. Okay, so you did nationals, you hit the 880, and then you went to Worlds in Sweden. And at Worlds in Sweden, you did 37.5 kilos less. So what happened there?
Yeah, dude, I don't even know. I mean, so it was my first time really traveling outside the country. It was COVID, so people got to understand, your neighbor was afraid to go to the grocery store down the block, let alone fly across the
Yeah.
world, right? So I was flying across the world. I had to fly alone. I'm a young kid at this time. This was my first world championship, of course, everything I dreamed about. I mean, 2 years prior, the only reason why I set out to powerlift was to become a world champion, and here it was in front of me. Um, so it's that. It's again, the pandemic made things tricky because of the testing. You had to get like 2 tests before you left, and it was just like all this stuff. You're in a foreign country, so the last thing you want is to be stuck there. So I'm thinking about that as well. And this was my first time doing like a water cut, and I didn't really have any guidance on that. In terms of like coaching, handling, dude, I didn't know that you should have a handler at Worlds. I didn't even really know what their job was going to be. So I didn't have one going in. And so, dude, I just got really lucky. Like when I got to Sweden, so it was really difficult to get to the spot. Like I don't know, people who know IPF will be able to relate to this, but for whatever reason, the IPF puts these big championships in the middle of nowhere. So they'll tell you Sweden, but it's not Stockholm. This was in Halstead. This was like you had to take a plane, obviously to Stockholm, then you have to take a plane from Stockholm to like Gutenberg, and then take a train to Halstead, and then find that. Dude, it's like, bro, and I feel bad because, I was a junior, but I was like 20, 21. Some of these juniors are like, they're like 18, 19. Some kids are like 16, 17 trying to traverse this. It's difficult, So I give them a lot of credit. But long story short, I got really lucky. When I got to the meet hotel, I met this lifter. His name is Isaac Whistler, like awesome kid. He's a great coach, awesome kid. And he was competing as well. And he just really helped me out. He like gave me some info on the water cut situation so that I could actually make weight. But obviously I didn't know how to recomp. And this was my first time in a foreign country. So grocery stores, understanding what to pre-plan, where to shop, what food to get. I couldn't read the back of packages. Like I was dealing with all that stuff. So I say all that to say everything that would have helped me perform well wasn't really in my toolbox. And I don't use it as an excuse because as an athlete, it's your responsibility to know those things. I just honestly just didn't know those things. Um, so I just didn't recomp well. Like I was eating canned tuna on crackers for all my meals because that was the only thing I felt I could trust. So yeah, so I just think I didn't recomp as well, and my training at the time wasn't going as well either. The only other thing I had to contend with was just worlds and the depth calls and stuff. Certain things with judging that you might run into that you may not always run into. Which again, I take accountability for. That's something I should always be prepared for. But yeah, I think the cut probably made the biggest difference, and then the speed of the meet. That's the last thing. Speed of the meet. I was not used to world speed. I mean, that was like a easily 2.5 hour meet. So that's pretty fast. So
Well, you still won, so that's the main thing.
yeah,
And
good point.
it's interesting hearing you talk about the foreign. Like I think about the first worlds I ever competed in was 2013, and I went to every at the time I was competing in a federation called GPC. I went to every GPC worlds, either as a lifter or a coach. After that, until basically 2019 or 2020, like yeah, basically until COVID. And the technology change across that time, like even with you in 2020, like it's difficult. Now you just have like Google Lens on your phone. You translate everything in an instant. You know exactly what you're getting anytime. All the all the public transport is all mapped out on Google. It's so easy to navigate. Back then you're using like even just in 2013, we're using like paper maps. We're having to walk around aimlessly trying to find someone who can help us translate if we're stuck somewhere. It's so easy now, but even 5 years ago, like there were still challenge. And for your first time alone as a 21-year-old or whatever, were you 21, 22?
Yeah,
Like
somewhere around there.
as a young guy, I mean that's wild. All right, so you did worlds, then you also did worlds again in South Africa. You've done a bunch of worlds. What about Sheffield? How did you get invited to your first Sheffield? What was the experience like with that? I want to, because my audience, I'm sure we get a lot of IPF listeners, but I'm sure we get a lot of people who aren't as familiar with the lifter side of things like Sheffield.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Sheffield is probably the biggest and best competition in the IPF. So IPF World Championship is a world championship that's not going anywhere. That has the pedigree of a world championship. But Sheffield is thousands of people in the audience. It is a massive meet. It's 24 lifters, 12 of the best men, 12 of the best women. The way that you typically get invited or you earn your invite is by not only winning worlds in your weight class, but totaling within 95% of that world record for the weight class, which is a big deal because that means that you could win worlds, be the best in the world, but if you're not close enough to that world record, you're not going. Um, so that's what it is, and it's held in Sheffield, UK. So that's why it's called that. I actually happened to go twice because of a wild card invite. So I did not win worlds to go. I was invited to go by SBD, and absolute blessing, like amazing time there. By far my favorite experience as an athlete, and I can't wait to be back. But it's one of those experiences that when you step on the platform, getting under the heaviest weight you've ever gotten under, that's already exhilarating. When you do it in front of 2,500 people or more, it just amps it up to like, I mean, it passed the dial. You know what I mean? You just crank the whole thing, and it's just crazy. So it's an awesome experience. So I was invited. I wish I could give you the exact criteria for the wildcard invites. Usually it's competition. It's like what would make a really great battle, what would make a really great show. Which lifters do we feel like are just like they're right there and they just need that opportunity, and the fans want to see it too. There's a lot of things that probably come into play, but yeah, I was invited twice. I had two wild.
I mean, like, what's the experience like as a lifter? And I don't mean just like getting out there and being on the stage because you said it's the best competition in the IPF. I would say it's the best competition in the world. There's just nothing like it. Like, there's nothing as big. There's no competition where there are 2,000 spectators specifically coming to watch powerlifting. There's literally nothing anywhere near that. And I would absolutely love to go one day just to see it with my own eyes. But yeah, what's it like as a lifter? Is it like a regular? Because Worlds is pretty much like a regular comp. You know, you show up, you register, you warm up, you do your thing. What's the Sheffield experience like for a lifter? What's different
Yeah.
to
So
say? Well,
Worlds and Sheffield, if there's a spectrum of meet experiences, Worlds is on one end and Sheffield's all the way on the other. They operate at the complete different extremes. Worlds is very serene. I would even use the word maybe cerebral. Think elevator music, sterile, very plain. And not saying that in a negative way. It's just what it is. It's fast, it's bright, it's just what it is. Sheffield is a show. Sheffield is a spectacle. It still exists so that the standards of the sport can be upheld. But it is a show, make no mistake. And I've said this before, so I'm not afraid to say this now. Some people may hate me for saying it. Sheffield is built for you to do well as a powerlifter. It's very difficult to not do well as a powerlifter at Sheffield because everything is catered to you. So obviously SBD, massive equipment company, puts this thing on to make money. They love the sport, they want to feed the sport, but they also want to make money, which there's nothing wrong with that. So naturally they want the athletes to do as well as they can. That means that the meet is not 2.5 hours. The meet is like 3 to 5 or 3 to 4, right? Which is a decent length of a meet. It means you get some time. The crowd itself, that is huge. Like people don't understand the amount of energy that pours out of people when they're cheering or booing, but when there's just that much energy. So that's huge. The days leading up, you're going to have media engagements, which is really cool. If you're not used to that, whether or not you are sponsored by SBD, they're hosting you as an athlete. So you're going to get video footage, pictures, all this really cool stuff. Amazing. It's a lot of fun. They usually give you, I forget how many tickets. Maybe it's two or one. Some sort of like complimentary ticket package for family or friends who you might want to have show up at the meet. You got posters and stuff. Point is, they make a show of it. So you'll have media engagements prior to. You've got meet and greets after, and then there's usually like a big athlete dinner at the end where they do awards and all that stuff. Um, the way that you win Sheffield is it's actually kind of cool. Like it's basically whoever totals or like out totals a world record of their weight class by the biggest margin. Um, so it's kind of cool. It also incentivizes some great battles. You've got guys who are 74s who cut down to 66 and try and do be strategic there. You've got the opposite. Some guys just eat up and really just try and fill out a class, and it's really cool. It's cool. You win a lot of money, which is another exhilarating thing. You win money for every world record you break, and then you win money if you podium. So it's a decent amount. So if you're one of the best in the world and for a fact you're going to break one or two records, you're going to walk away with at least 10 grand right there. You know, for doing one competition. So yeah, it's a great experience. Hopefully that answers your question, but yeah.
yeah, no, that's exactly what I was looking for. Because I've been very outspoken about what I think needs to change about powerlifting if we're going to elevate it. And the absolute worst thing that we do in powerlifting is that we make powerlifting about running competitions rather than about entertaining spectators. Like if we're genuinely going to grow, if we're genuinely going to get more commercial, we have to bring numbers in. And the only way you bring numbers is by making it spectator friendly. Like even at a world championships, if you bring your mum, she has no fucking idea what's going on. She doesn't know who's first, second. That relies on a really, really good commentator, but even then it's hard to keep up with. There's nothing. Like I've tried to give my ideas. I've got entrepreneurship sort of ideas around all of how we can make this better, and I've been giving it to people who can develop because I'm kind of stepping my way out. But it very much sounds like it's about the spectator. And how do you create a good show for the spectator? Well, you fucking put a shitload of effort into the lifter experience because it's about making sure that Gavin Adin, sorry, Gavin Adin braids his hair, comes out, does a deadlift, steps over the bar, fucking fist pumps the crowd. That's what it's about. And then IPF comes and makes a rule that you can't step over the bar. That's another like end of the conversation, end of the podcast conversation. But no, man, I love that. That perfectly answers the question. And as much as I'd like to just keep lifting, talking about your lifting history, you're a person, and you have a lot more to offer the people listening than just your lifting. And that's kind of where I want to branch into. And I want to start with a question around powerlifting first before we sort of branch into greatness, which is, again, I've listened to hours of you in the last couple of weeks. I've spent hours of time with you. You know, we've been working together in some capacity since late last year or mid to late last year. And I've heard you say numerous times consistently uh, themes along the lines of powerlifting is just a vehicle. Uh, you don't like powerlifting, or you don't like what powerlifting's become. Specifically on one podcast recently, you actually said that you said, you know, I don't think you said I hate powerlifting, but you said something in a really negative light about powerlifting, or that powerlifting is not what it used to be, and that really stuck out to me. You said, yeah, that's what it was. You're like, powerlifting just isn't the same as it was. And my question is, do you think that powerlifting's not the same as it was, or do you think that it's not the same as it was for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely the latter. It's just not the same for me. I think first of all, both are true. The sport is evolving, and any healthy organism is going to evolve. So, if you look at the sport of powerlifting, if it didn't change, there'd be a problem. So we want to see it grow. But yeah, I mean, I it's definitely been a different experience for me as I've grown up through the sport. I've had a very unique experience with the sport where I failed a lot and I failed very fast. Whereas a lot of athletes, they that trajectory for them is, I don't know, a third as long, maybe twice as long in some cases. So for me, I mean, I really went like, let's put it in perspective. Like I had basically two local meets, two national meets, and then it was worlds, Sheffield, or it was like worlds, Sheffield, worlds, and all these big meets where all this is expected. And I'm trying to make progress at the same time and trying to manage everything and build the social media business and do all this stuff. And so my experience is very different, I think, than most people in the sport. Not better, not worse, just different. And so I agree with you. I think the correction there is that it's the sport has, I think, changed a lot for me. It's not the same as it once was for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like when you speak about that, what I hear is you've had a relatively accelerated career, because most people in powerlifting have a very late inflection point. Like powerlifting is both in training and in competition is very much built for people to not fail. Like you very rarely fail lifts in training compared to something like weightlifting where you fail every session. You very rarely have terrible competitions. Like coaches are there with you, trying to help you hit your numbers, go 9 for 9, win competitions, whatever it is. And you normally have to grind and get micro failures for years before you touch top of nationals, world championships, Sheffield. Whereas, like you said, in a matter of a couple of years, you're at the top consistently. So it's like you've skipped the learning phase, or you've skipped the grinding phase that a lot of people go through. I'm not saying that you didn't learn, that you didn't grind. It's just been accelerated, right? And so your maturity as a lifter through the sport has also been accelerated, because a lot of people reach your point after, say, 10 or 15 years rather than 5 or 6 years, and that's an interesting experience, and I love that you have the maturity to just identify and say that it's different for you. So I'm curious then, when you say the sport has grown and changed and it has to mature, what does that actually mean? Well, like, what part of that do you not like? What's changed in the culture of the sport that's kind of turning you off?
It's a great question because it's not fair for me to say it and then not have an answer to that question. And I don't know if I have a good answer to it. I think I have an honest answer. I don't know if I have a good answer to it. Um, I think for me, like my experience is, like I said, man, like I have fallen short so many times, and a lot of my mistakes I've made when they mattered most, you know, and it cost me, quite literally like almost everything in some cases. And so, you like you get hit hard. but I will say that you learn faster the harder you get hit. Because when you get slapped, it's like, okay, yeah, I got slapped. But when you get fucking rocked and you're missing teeth after that, you're like, I'm not fucking doing that again. So I feel like a lot of and don't get me wrong, like I've had some really great moments throughout my powerlifting career so far, but there have been a lot of those moments where you just get rocked, or at least it feels like that. Like that's my perspective, not to dramatize it, but that's how it feels sometimes. And so, um, it's like it's sometimes it's hard to see through an impartial lens. You know, the other thing that I think um, is worth noting is social media plays a really big role in not your success as a powerlifter, but what you can do with powerlifting. Because nobody pays you as a powerlifter. I was training my ass off long before there were cameras and social media and all this other bullshit, right? And so for me, it's kind of like those two kind of go hand in hand. And so much of the culture, if not all of powerlifting culture, exists on social media. Whereas I'll give you an example. There are guys who could be at the top of their game in corporate America and not even have Instagram, and they'll still be fine. They're still working. But in powerlifting, how often do we see people who are at the top of their game or people who would do anything in powerlifting without social media being a part of it in some way? And so it's almost like part of the DNA of the sport culture now, at least on the IPF side, which is not bad or good. It's just what it is. And so because of that, there's a lot that I think has changed as well. Like social media itself, literally as an engine, as a content engine for fitness creators, has completely changed. That's definitely true.
Mm.
Trends change all the time, but just the market, something as simple as brands not paying influencers really much anymore in the fitness space because there's really no ROI anymore in it. Like the little things like that, that can definitely impact how you feel about the sport that you give your life to and try to monetize through social media. So that's things like that are definitely a factor. But in terms of the sport itself, I think it's a little challenging because as I've stepped outside of it, I've seen like powerlifting feels very, very small. It feels like it's a bubble. And there's like a lot of like sub cults within the bubble. And, I think that there are, like in any organization, there's good people and there's bad people. And I'm sure, like, as much as I may feel like, oh man, there's so many so much negativity, whatever, there's probably a time when I contributed to that. So I'm not trying to act like, I'm on some fucking high horse, but I definitely do feel like the community isn't as strong as like we like to think it is and stuff. And so I don't know, man, like I hope this makes sense. Like I said, I don't know if I have a good answer, but I feel like I'm being honest. It just feels, it doesn't feel like home. That's probably a good way for me to put it.
Mm.
I don't feel like I belong to the powerlifting community. I feel like I'm just a
Yeah.
lifter who powerlifts. You know what I mean? And I'm okay with that. But as somebody who started off on the outskirts, and then because of being able to compete at a high level and social media and all this other stuff, I was able to get really wrapped into that. I had the sponsors, I did all of it, and I was at every event and I did all of it. So to be so in it and drink the Kool-Aid and see all that, and then to now be out of it, it's a very different experience. So, like I said, not positive or negative. I think it's just different.
No, man, I want to validate what you say. So let me tell you what I'm hearing, and you can tell me if it sounds true to you. What I'm hearing is that you have outgrown powerlifting
That's a,
as you see it.
yeah.
Like honestly, like as you see powerlifting, you've outgrown it, and that I mean, you've seen what the future holds for you. You've got other passions, you've got other aspirations. You've outgrown what powerlifting was for you. You came in, you maximized what you could do while you could, and now you've seen that there's more things out there.
I definitely think that's a great way to put it. I agree. And I will say at the same time, I'm still just as hungry to achieve and accomplish within the sport, um, but not for the sake of the sport, if that makes sense. So, like when I started powerlifting, I didn't really know the sport. I didn't care about the sport, and not in the sense of like, oh fuck the sport, who cares if it lives or dies? That's not what I mean. I just mean I like literally the same way like there's somebody out there who I've never met, I don't know their life. How could I possibly care about them? I don't know them, right? So that's what I mean. I genuinely didn't know the sport. I didn't know the people in it, nothing. So all I cared about was I want to get as strong as I possibly fucking can and see just how far I can push myself. And I have this belief that if I can be my best, I will be the best. And that's what I believe. And so that's what my goal was. Now, what happened was as soon as I started to get more and more into the sport and competing more, you kind of, like I said, the best way to put it is you drink the Kool-Aid. You start to talk like everybody. You start to think like everybody, and so all of that. So you become part of the group, right? And that makes sense. And so that's kind of what happened. I got molded to all of that, and now I've kind of like come full circle, and I've stepped back out of it. I'm like, you know what? I'm good. Like you guys can have that. But I'm going to still try and become the absolute greatest in the world by just being me and just doing my thing, staying in my lane, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. And uh, on that podcast I recorded with Colton the other day, he said much the same thing. He's not a powerlifter. He doesn't see himself as a powerlifter. But that doesn't mean you can't focus on powerlifting. It's really just down to identity. So I want to paraphrase something that you said, because as we shift this conversation to greatness, I'm drawing a lot of inspiration from, if anyone Googles your name or jumps on YouTube and searches your name, you've got a keynote speech on the cost of greatness. Uh, and one thing that I'm paraphrasing of you said, I want to be a world champion. Powerlifting doesn't matter. My identity is not the sport. Identity is an internal locus of control. And that really stood out to me as like what I see common amongst a lot of the top lifters that I've ever worked with, or if I haven't worked with them, rubbed shoulders with them and just met them, spoken to them, had dinner with them, whatever. It's very much the same. They're not driven by some attachment to actual sport as much as the internal drive to essentially be great, right? Um, okay, so in that keynote speech, you break greatness down into three things, or three costs essentially. You have to get out of your comfort zone, your habits, and yourself. And when you talk about getting out of your comfort zone, you talk about fears. Like you asked the crowd in the speech, what are you afraid of? And I want to ask you that. What in terms of, and let's keep it lifting focused. What are you afraid of? Like what in your pursuit to greatness, to being a world champion, to winning Sheffield, to whatever it is that you want to achieve in powerlifting, can you put words to what you're?
First thing that comes to mind is being average. Second thing that comes to mind is not being good enough. Third thing that comes to mind is not seeing it through, aka not fulfilling my potential, falling short of my potential. Those three probably in that order. Yeah.
In working with you, the thing that I identify as maybe an unspoken fear is the fear of making the wrong decision. We joke about the decision around footwear, or this technical aspect, or that, but I think in a broader sense, you're so committed to the end goal of being great, of being a champion, of being at the top in whatever capacity that you exist in, because I see that in all aspects of what you talk about and what you do. And it makes a lot of sense. Anyone I've spoken to who is aspiring to be the best at something, the fear of the wrong decision is terrifying. The fear of that, because you know what that plays out as. Like the hint of, like, if I do this, then this will happen, this will happen, this will happen, and I won't achieve this. And you get stuck at these crossroads all the time, right? In all aspects of life, you're constantly making decisions. Uh, how does that reign for you? Does that sound true, or am I way off?
No, I think it's true. I would argue that it might even be rooted to some, like if there's symptoms and diseases, I might argue that that's rooted to the fear of not being good enough or the fear of being average or the fear of not achieving my potential. Because that is when you flick that first domino, I see indecision or this fear of not making the right choice. I see that as like that 10th domino or maybe that second domino, even, because I'm afraid of being average. I don't want to make the wrong decision here. So what decision do I have to make? Whereas if I were to flip it and say, well, I'm afraid to make the wrong decision. So I'm afraid to be average. See how I feel like that it might be the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, I completely agree. I think it's true. And funny enough, like one of the things that I really appreciated about one of the Loom videos that you sent me for feedback was, and I think I said this, I forget if I said this in a YouTube video, if I said this to you directly. I think it was a YouTube video,
You
but
said it. You said it in YouTube. I watched you
Yeah, it
just
was. Oh, yeah. Okay, okay. So you know exactly what I'm going to say then. Yeah. So when you didn't probably even think it was a big deal, but the moment that you said specifically what I should do, or what you thought might be the better option, that made it a million times easier for me. Because even if I didn't think that was the best option, I now don't have another option because that's what my coach has decided is the best option. So that's what I will do. And so that is very freeing in and of itself. And one thing I have been working on, I heard Jeff Bezos say this a while back, and it's just like it's always in the back of my mind. He said, we don't worry about making the right decision. We worry about making the decision right. And I think that that's really powerful as well because, you may not always be in control of the path or the how. So, now it's just a matter of trusting in your ability to adapt and to make the decision or make your circumstances work for you or make them right.
yeah. So I don't know how deep down that rabbit hole you've been. There's a book called Bezos Letters to Shareholders. And it's a guy that's basically taken all the letters to his shareholders over the 20, 30 years, whatever it is, and analyzed them and picked out like the mindset of Jeff Bezos. You can go and read that. It's a longish read. What's better? There's a podcast just called Founders, and it's literally one of the best podcasts in the world for anyone who's interested in business or interested in greatness. I think you would absolutely fucking love it,
Yeah, I'm
man.
gonna write that
It's
down.
this guy this guy, the guy who runs it, his only thing is he reads every single piece, like biography, autobiography, letter shareholder, every single thing, every interview of these big founders, and then condenses it into their mindset. And listen to the one with Bezos because there's a shit ton on decision making, and it's fantastic. And do you currently have any sort of process around decision making? Is there anything that you kind of live by?
Um, it depends. So like So I guess like the theme of my decision making is it's kind of like a reverse engineering process. So like I'll go top down. I'll think like, okay, if this is the outcome I want, what's the step just before that? What's the step just before that? Bop, 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 bop. And then sometimes to double check the work, I'll flip it and I'll be like, if I choose to do this, where will this lead? But it's so much harder for me to accurately depict that. So I'd rather just start with the destination and work backwards. Um, some decisions, dude, man, like I got some crazy ADHD. So some decisions can be pretty impulsive. I sometimes fly by the seat of my pants and I just adapt. I'm just like, fuck it. You know what? My gut tells me that this is right, and that's something that I've been working on a lot. Is trusting my instincts, trusting myself and my gut. That's something that powerlifting taught me a while back. I lost a world championship because of that, and so yeah, that's another route. But kind of trying to use them in tandem is really helpful. Having like a legitimate, like almost like logistical system, and then also just fucking shut everything out and just feel it for a moment. What does your gut tell you? And then prayer. You know, not to kind of shove it down anybody's throat, but I like to think that I'm faith centered, so I try to pray about some of the things that I may feel. Shit, man, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do, and I'm not going to know what to do. So I'm going to trust you to lead me. And as long as I bring myself to Christ as honest as I can, then that's it. The rest is kind of in His hands. So those are probably the three ways that I make my decisions.
Yeah, no, no, I love it, man. I love it. I love it. It's a very thoughtful process. The thing that I've found the most helpful for me personally, and whether this reigns true for anyone or not, uh, no matter what you choose, you're going to have some regret about it. And I like this statement that we get to choose our regrets.
Mm.
You get to choose what you're going to regret more or less, and that can sometimes help guide the path. Before we move on to the next question, I just want to ask something on what you just said. You said you're learning to trust your gut more. It lost you a world champion, not trusting your gut. I'm assuming that's what you meant. What was the lesson? What happened, and what did you take away from it?
Yeah, so I've had some micro experiences. I've had multiple micro experiences in powerlifting that I didn't trust my gut on, and as a result, we made different choices. And it's not to say that things would have ended up the way I wanted them to, but I do think that they would have ended up different. So I'll give you two examples. One of the micro ones was a strategy that I had for Sheffield, which essentially is just attempt selections, really. Attempt selections and my water cup protocol. I prefer the sauna. I think that it works, and it can be brutal, but for whatever reason, I'm able to recomp really well from it. And I had a nutrition coach at the time who really wanted me to instead try the gut cut. The gut cut didn't work. The sodium water manipulation also didn't work. And so then he wanted me to try the salt bath. And that was like, we're talking about hours before the meet. And I'm like 6, 7, 8 pounds over. Um, and so I'm sitting in there for a while. He's got a bunch of athletes running back and forth. I'm thinking to myself, like, man, I should really just fucking go use that sauna. And I trust him. I trust him. Trust him. And long story short, didn't work. I ended up having to sauna, and I ended up weighing in with 30 minutes left before openers. So I had to rush recomp, and then that was, God willing, man, I was able to battle it out with Carlos from Guyana at the time for the squat world record, and I ended up getting it. But that was tight. Had I just trusted my gut on the recomp, then things would have been fine. The temp selection one is a little bit more macro, but I still consider, again, just one of those micro experiences because I've had this same exact thing come up multiple times. Basically, I was at, I believe it was Malta Open World Championship, and I do not fault the guy who was handling me one bit. He's a phenomenal coach, a phenomenal handler. He was just doing his job the way he knows how to do it. But long story short, it was in attempt selections. And a common theme with IPF coaches and IPF lifters is be conservative, do the minimum necessary, and go 9 for 9, right? Like those are like the things that they'll tout from the fucking rooftops. I happen to be the opposite. For better or worse, I happen to be like, fuck it, let's throw the Hail Mary, let's just load it up and see what we got. And, obviously my method often doesn't work. But when it hits, it hits. So long story short, I took my opener. It was like 300 keys, and I missed it because I lost my balance. Really freak thing. Doesn't ever happen, but of course it happened. Now, going up to the second, I knew to win that championship, I would need at least 750 or 340, 345 keys. I knew I would need at least 340 to try and win this championship because otherwise I'd have to load way too much on deadlift. So going into the second, I told my handler, I was like, listen, I know we missed the opener, but go up to the planned second attempt, which was somewhere around like 327 and a half. That way I can make a jump to 340 because I had to make sure I secured depth on that was really the biggest thing. It wasn't about strength, it was about depth. Instead, he's like, okay, sure. I walk out to the platform, I see 310 on the board, not 327 and a half. And I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. So he kind of went against what I asked him to do and my gut instinct and trusting in myself. And he loaded 310. And so I got 310. Then we had to jump. And I was like, you know what, dude, like, fuck it. Let's just go straight to 340. And I'm pretty sure I recommended 340. I forget if I recommended 340 or if I was like, you know what, screw it. Like, just put in whatever you think. Either way, we ended up taking around 322 or 320, 322 and a half or 327 and a half, 325, which was not going to be enough to win. Except what's even worse is I take it, I get it, and then I'm celebrating. And as soon as I start celebrating, jury goes to check and they overturn it. So I end up losing that. So it's very difficult to win a world championship in the 93s with a 683 squat when you don't deadlift over 800. So that kind of set me up for the day. Now, what I've learned from that and what I take into my meets is I almost always take my third attempt squat on my second. And if I've got more gas for the bigger third, I'll go for a bigger third. But if nothing else, it gives me 2 shots at hitting depth at that weight. So that's just 2 small examples. But yeah, trusting my gut is a big deal.
Well, thanks, Ben. Thanks for clarifying that. We haven't gotten to competition as coach lifter yet, so I'm going to do this live because this is the speech I give basically every lifter, which is when we're planning attempts, right? How many attempts at Rising Tides are you planning to fail? No, right? So how many attempts do you get? 9? No, fuck that. You get 3. You've got 3 attempts. That's how I approach picking numbers. So
Bruh,
like, I
this dude's gonna fucking,
yeah.
oh my God. You bitch. No, you gotta let me, dude, let me jump like 100 kilos from my first to my second, and then let
But
me,
that's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly
okay,
what I'm
okay,
saying.
okay, okay.
I'm like we go in with faith that 350 or whatever it's going to be on the third attempt is there. So if you open on 290 and then want to jump to 340, fucking go for it because we've only got 3 attempts. You're going to get all 3 attempts. Now, that's
Okay.
my mindset. Now, obviously, I'm there to help not make fucking stupid decisions. I'm not going to make you go fucking 320, then 330,
No,
then
I'm only
340. I
kidding,
know
bro.
how you like to play this game.
I trust you. I trust you with it. I trust you 100%. But that's the other thing, right? It's like if because this is why it's so crazy. Like so much of it starts at the beginning. Like if you truly take the time to learn the person that you're working with, you know, build a relationship with your coach that's more than just, hey, bro, what's up? Where's my program? It has to be deeper than that, you know? And you truly learn to build that trust with that person. Now you know that if nothing else, they're making the decision that's in your best interest, not necessarily what's going to make them look good, not necessarily even what everyone else would applaud as the smart choice, truly making it in your best interest. I can go with that because then to me, if we fail together. Fuck it. But so much of my experience has been, well, if I fail, it's really because somebody else made a call, but it's actually my fault because I let them do that. You know, I didn't take responsibility for that. And you know, it's one thing to lose and to fail on your own terms. It's another when you're like, fuck, man, like I thought, like I knew that was the answer. I knew it was C on the test, you know, and I put B because I saw his paper and he put B, and you know, it's just you don't want to be in that position. So, but I trust you. I trust you. If you tell me, Gavin, I want you to load 800 on squat, I'm loading it.
No, I trust you, man. I trust the jumps. I can look at your open powerlifting. I can see the data. You can ask Meg, man. Like when you did nationals, I wasn't coaching you at the time. You're still with John. She was doing a photo shoot, and I was just like the fucking outfit boy that throws the pants when she needs the new pants or whatever. So I was just sitting on the couch watching the live feed, and you can verify with her. I was watching bench, and I was like, Gavin's coming out now, 190. Oh shit! I was like, Meg, he's gotten injured. He must have hurt himself in the in the warm ups. And then I'm waiting for like on the second flight, I'm waiting to see like 200 or something, and then I'm like, he must have just done an opener like a token and left it there. And then you come out at towards the end of the flight with 220 and just smoke it. I'm like, okay, this is how he rolls. I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
All right, man. So I asked you the question, what are you afraid of? The first thing you said, or one of the first things you said, one of the three things you said was being average. And that was actually my next question. You know, like in the speech you mentioned you were below average. And so the first thing I think when I hear someone I'd say I can't be average. I have to be the best, or I need to be above average or whatever. What is average? What does that even mean?
Hmm. I think for me, it's half and half. Half of it's just like I just can feel it. I can just tell when I'm operating suboptimally, not achieving, you know, my best, what would be considered average if you looked at the absolute greatest version of Gavin versus the absolute worst. Um, and then the other half is like literally just objectively. Let's look at on a spectrum everybody who does this one thing you're trying to do, you know. And what I like to do, which is a little unfair to myself, but fuck it, I think that it's necessary. Forget about the other 99%. You know, I'm not in this to be the other 99%. I want to be the top 1% of the 1% of the 1%. So let's look at the top 1% and let's look at the average there. And even then, let's zoom in from there. Look at the absolute best, all the world champions across the board. Who has the highest coefficient? You know, who is the best? Okay, I need to be beating, and that's always been my mindset. So I hopefully that answers your question, but it's kind of like objectively, look at everybody who's doing what I'm trying to do, and then internally, does this feel like I'm achieving what I'm meant to achieve?
Yeah. No, I love it because we have to unpack the question to understand, or for people to understand, because I asked that. I know what the answer is going to be because I work with people like you. I'm kind of wired that way as well. You know, I don't want to be average, but I find myself asking the question a lot. Is it average compared to the crowd, or is it average compared to ourselves? And I think for you, it is average compared to yourself because if you won Sheffield, if you won Worlds, if you were crowned the world champion, and on the day you didn't perform as well as you knew you could, you'd still believe you were. Hormozy says it really nicely. He talks about like the three core psychological traits of ultra successful people, and one of them is massive insecurity, fearing that they will never be enough.
I'm
And
just
it is.
waiting
It's
on
like
the
this internal driving force.
I'm just waiting on the ultra successful half. That's what I'm waiting on. I have that piece. We got that piece. We're just waiting on.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
only
it's the
kidding.
same kind of bullshit philosophical question. Like, what is success even defined by? Like
Yeah.
material success? Is success just being satisfied that you are not quote unquote average next to yourself, or next to like it's a you could go on about that for hours. But my follow up question to the average thing is, where do you sit on the scale right now?
In lifting, in powerlifting.
No, on the scale of average in your head, are you average? Are you slightly above? Like, how far are you off being able to say, I am not average?
I think for me, the clock resets like either every morning or every week. But I would say, uh, see, like I would love to say that, fuck no, man, I'm not average. Who the fuck are you talking to? But on the other side, it's like, no, I don't think you understand. You ain't shit, you know? So I think if I had to put a number on it, it's got to be like 6.5 out of 10 if five is average, or if five is the mean, you know? I definitely can acknowledge the work that I do and the impact that I can have. And I know myself enough to know that I apply myself. And so I have to give myself credit for that. At the same time, I totally see the massive gap that exists. And if I am being honest with myself, I have to be honest about that gap. So, you know what, dude, I do think it's asymptotal. I do think that you'll just never actually reach that access. It'll just always, but maybe that's the point of it. That's part of the pursuit. There was never about like this particular outcome per se. It's about the process. It's who you become in pursuit of the outcome. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, I think. But it is there. Yeah, I would say I recognize, especially now with what it is that I'm pursuing. It's tough because, and I guess this is like a little too philosophical, but outside of powerlifting, I've been pursuing acting for like the past year. And what I will say is this: I know, like I know my potential. I see it. I know everybody listening has felt this way about something at some point in their life, period, because you're human. We all have this same human experience. So you'd have to be a fucking literal boulder rock on the side of the road to not feel this. So I know you can relate. There's something in you that's, I could be fucking great at that. Like, man, I love that. And sometimes it shows up as just passion. You just want to do it all the time. But a lot of times it's like, no, I genuinely feel like I could be the best at this, whether it's being a parent, doesn't matter. And so that's kind of how I feel about lifting. It's also how I feel about acting. And so the world hasn't caught up to that yet. So I've gotten some stuff and I'm creating some success, but I'm nowhere near. I'm way below average if you're looking at the average in that industry. But yet in my mind, I'm all the way up here because I know my potential. And so it's kind of like that as well. There's this internal dialogue of externally, if we were going by tangible asset, no, I am fucking below average. But I know that I know my potential. I know my value here in this space. The world just has to catch up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, no, no. It absolutely makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. On the way to getting there, you mentioned the process, and I feel like people use that as a throwaway line a lot. Oh, it's not, you got to, you focus on the process, the outcome will come, or this process oriented marathon, not a sprint, blah, 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 blah. I think the difference between people who are really wired to be the greatest at whatever they do versus people who want to be the greatest at what they do but aren't going to be is an actual belief and an ability to go back to the process and be like, okay, I didn't win that worlds, but I did do this and this and this and this and this, and I achieved this along the way. Because without that, you just stop when you lose worlds. With that, you get fired up to go harder the next time and harder the next time and harder the next time. And you may not ever be satisfied with the result, but you're satisfied with the pursuit. And that really is kind of the game. It's just like the focus on the pursuit because that's what you're doing it for. Like it's nice to say, I want to be the greatest, but you just highlighted there's kind of no such thing as that. There's no end to climbing the top. You said it just kind of never ends, right? It just keeps going up. And so it's not even falling in love with the pursuit. It's almost like being addicted to the pursuit, you know? And I think a lot of people come into something like powerlifting or whatever they're trying to do, and they're like, I want to be the best at this. It's like, yeah, you do, but you're not going to be because all you think about is the next milestone rather than the process of actually getting there.
Yeah,
And so my follow-up question to this then is about the acting because like if we look at your powerlifting journey, like we said, it happened quickly. It was an accelerated career. Are you prepared in something like acting to not have an accelerated career? Like do you think that if it takes you 10, 20 years to reach the top, and I have no doubt that with your full commitment, you will reach the top in some capacity in acting, like you will be successful. I just wonder if it's a harder game to play than something like powerlifting, and if it
of
is going to
course.
require more time, more grind. And I don't think you're under any grand delusion that, you say you feel like you're up here, and I think what you're expressing with that is that, like, that's how committed you are.
Mm,
Like, you're getting an experience out of it that you're falling in love with, which is going to fuel your process.
mhm. Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a couple things here to unpack. First and foremost, you have to pick something to pursue. You have to have something that's going to, it doesn't have to give you purpose or meaning. It's quite just literally something to work on so that you are working on yourself. Because by working on things, you are thus working on yourself. That's part of the process. So that's the first piece. If I have to have something to pursue, I might as well pick something that I want. I might as well pick something that I think I could be really good at, right? And we all do this naturally. That's how we kind of fall into the careers that we do most of the time, especially later on in life. So once I decide, okay, I want this, now I have a vision for it. I decide, okay, this is it. Like this, I can see it so clear. I could be Marvel's next Wolverine. This is it. Now it's just a matter of action and execution. And that's an iterative process. I'm going to learn as much as I can, execute, 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 fail a fuck ton, learn a fuck ton, execute, 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 and just keep going and going and going. And the funny part is, you just hit it on the head. Even if you do reach that and accomplish that vision, guess what? As soon as you get to the peak of a high mountain, you know what your reward is? A higher mountain to look at. And you're like, fuck, all right, now I got to climb that one, right? And so that's always going to be there. So I say that to say the pursuit is always there. To me, I'm gonna fucking die anyway. So whether it takes 10 years, 20 years, happens tomorrow, would I love for it to happen tomorrow? Of course. Am I gonna work so that it happens yesterday? Of course. But the timeline is fucking irrelevant because I have to do something anyway. So it's a trick question because whether it takes 2 days, 2 years, or never, I'm still gonna be grinding at it anyway because I'm not gonna give up on that, right? Um, but would I want it to happen sooner? Of course. World championship, dude. I thought I was going to be a two-time open world champion by the time I was 27. I'm 28, and I only have one junior world championship under my belt. You know, and I've got tons of haters thinking that I've fallen off. You know what I mean? So that's the discrepancy. But yet, to me, it's like again, it's not about the world title. There's a new world champion every year. It's not about that. It's who you become in pursuit of that, and that's your legacy. And so once you recognize that and you do it almost like for the love of the game, that's where not only will you have more fun, will things be more meaningful, but you will be more successful. Um, that's how I've approached the acting stuff, But yeah, I mean, I appreciate the kind words, but yeah, I do wholeheartedly believe that I can accelerate to the top relatively fast. I see it, I believe in it, and the same principles that I've learned and I have applied in powerlifting, I apply to acting, and I'm willing to learn in acting. So,
Love it, man. Absolutely love it. All right. Well, this kind of follows on from that as well, then, which is, again, using your own words, we get a choice as to how we embrace adversity. How does Gavin choose to embrace adversity?
hmm, you embrace adversity by adapting to it. It's that simple. You have to overcome it, and overcoming it doesn't mean beating it. It doesn't mean being strong in the typical sense. It simply means acknowledging it and moving forwards in spite of it. And that's it. That's all it has to be. But you have to move forward.
So what I'm hearing with that is, like, you get to choose the emotion that you attach to adversity and what it actually means to you.
100%.
Yeah. Which is, it's challenging. Like, I've heard this a lot in, my journey with psychological stuff around, like, you know these things happen, and a lot of the pain that we experience is literally in our head. It's not something that's happening to us right now. It's going on in our head, and there's emotion around it. And on the one hand, we're taught to feel the emotions, experience the emotion. On the other hand, we're taught to be like, it's happening in your head and it's not real, and you get to choose what to do with it. And the two don't really blend very well together, right? And so I guess, how do you choose
Hmm.
the response that you have to adversity? Because it's easy to say, just overcome it, just, try not to attach too much to it. What's your specific process around that? Or is it something that's just always been quite natural to you?
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's natural. I think it's a skill that anybody can learn. I think what is natural, or rather you learn through your environment, depending on how you grew up and the type of environment you come from. You learn you build a certain degree of resilience, so that's important. And I don't, you can always develop that later on, but it's a lot easier when you have to develop that when you're a kid. It sucks when you're a kid, but it helps you later on. But in that same speech, I say that adversity is an architect. And I truly believe that. And so, what's interesting though about architecture and building a home and all that, the same tools that you can use to build it could also destroy it. It's how you use those tools, it's what you do with that. And so, that's you, man. Like, that's your choice. You could choose for that to destroy you, or you could choose to use it to build yourself up, see it as an opportunity to grow. And I am not at all saying it's easy, man. I'm not at all. All I'm just saying is that it's possible and that we have the choice, which is a beautiful thing. It sucks, but it's also great. It sucks because it's like, well, fuck, I have to do this, and no one else can do this for me, really, and that sucks. And sometimes you're the reason why there's adversity. We kind of create our own problems. But the good thing is that you might just be in control of creating a better outcome because you have the power to do that, and that's a beautiful thing. So, like I said, it's a matter of choice and deliberately choosing to grow from it and to rise up from it and not let it crush you and crumble you. And don't get me wrong, you're going to have seasons and phases where, dude, when I lost my first open world championship, which is South Africa Worlds, I did everything I possibly could to win. Like, truly, dude, I mean, cardio, food, sleep, training, everything was dialed in, and I lost. I placed fourth. Um, and I was so upset, like so upset. And it took me probably 2 months to emotionally rebound from that and then keep and pick myself up, lick my wounds, and fucking keep going. So sometimes that's going to happen. But the more that happens, the more you get used to it. Again, you just get comfortable with failure because you realize it's not really failure. It's just an opportunity to learn. You just keep fucking going. The only way you truly fail is if you give up and you quit on yourself, which you get to choose if you do that. It's either that or you fucking die. So in my opinion, you might as well just keep going because if not, you'll die and it doesn't matter anyway. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I hope this answers your question, but adversity is an architect. You have to choose to grow as a result of it. It's always an opportunity to grow. Um, and the last thing I'll say on this note is because I know some people like to say, well, it's easy for you to say, listen, man, I still to this day am dealing with tons of issues when it comes to training and lifting and trying to make progress and trying to grow. This is the thing. Iron sharpens iron, right? The problem is sometimes life is going to sharpen you and you aren't iron yet. You're a piece of fucking wood. You're a stick. And what happens when iron meets a stick? That shit'll snap. And so it sucks. But what you don't realize is that unlike a stick that I pick up from outside, your material can change, can evolve. The density, the thickness, the strength of it. Before you know it, man, you're gonna be iron. Before you know it, you're fucking titanium. You're whatever that next strongest compound or chemical, whatever the fuck is. That's what you could become. But what is required to get there is to be sharpened by other hard objects. That's what it takes. And so you just have to have an openness and willingness to endure that and be hopeful throughout it. And sometimes that's enough, is just to endure it. But I think one of the easiest ways to endure it is if you have hope, and you can't have hope if you don't choose to believe that it's actually for your benefit in the long.
No, I love that, man. There's a fucking perfect answer. And I wanna add some context to some of my own context to it just for people listening. Because one of the first things you said was resilience, and I think it's easy for people to believe that the word resilience just means like you just shake it off, you don't care or whatever. But you went on to say all of what you said, which is highlighting that my understanding of resilience is your ability to return to a baseline. Like you get elevated, you get sad, you get emotional, you get whatever, and you return to a baseline. So like you came forth in South Africa, you licked your wound for 2 months, and then you came back to baseline. It took you 2 months to achieve resilience or to exert resilience, and over time you become more efficient at doing that. So resilience is not ignoring the pain or the problems or anything that you experience. It's exactly what Gavin said, which is it's a lesson, and you get good at learning lessons quicker. All right. The last question from me before I pull up what people asked on Instagram is around habits. When you were talking about habits in your speech, you mentioned the concept towards greatness being that you need to ruthlessly audit yourself. What do you do to ruthlessly audit yourself?
Yeah, so there's two major things. One is in the day to day, the other is in kind of like the more I don't even know, idealistic sense. So I have a vision board over there. And on my vision board, it's got all these great things that I want to achieve, people, places, all these things, right? Um, my goal, and I say this in the speech as well, my number one goal is to create this ideal version of me. What is this ideal self, right? What does he have? What does he drive? Who does he talk to? Where does he sleep? Like all of these things. How does he act? What's his moral code? What are his values? So I define all of these things. And usually to define it, I'm taking things from all of my favorite people, places, and things, right? So it's not mine, it's kind of borrowed. I'm creating this perfect person, so to speak. Then I say, okay, well, what would that perfect person do every day? What do they drive? When do they drive? Where are they going when they drive? What is their day? When do they go to the gym? What time do they wake up? What time do they go to bed? When they talk to people, how do they talk? Do they curse a lot? Do they not curse a lot? Are they positive? Are they negative? All of these things I start to define. And then I just go fucking try and do that. And so that's the first version. That's the idealistic way. You create this perfect model, this perfect version. And it's like, okay, like Mike Tyson says, be the champion before you're the champion. If I want to be a world champion powerlifter and that's my goal, well, how would a world champion powerlifter hold himself? What standards would he train to? Would he take care of his sleep or would he just stay up all night playing video games? Right. So these are things that easily right away audit your current habits because you're comparing them to the perfect ones, the perfect self, so to speak. In the day-to-day stuff, it is as simple as systems. In other words, creating routines, inputs equal outputs. So all I need to do is just audit literally my day-to-day. So what I usually tell people is I actually just had this conversation with the concierge guy. His name is Odie. He's fucking awesome. I was telling him the other day, I was like, look, man, he just got a promotion and he's excited working there. But I was like, think about your 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, right? Take everything you do in a week. Like you can actually write it out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. What do you do each day? Multiply that by 52, multiply that by 5. If you like the outcome, don't fucking change anything. If you don't like the outcome, you might have to change something. So what it does is it kind of speeds up the timetable of awareness, right? So once I do that, I can then go in and say, okay, well, I'm not getting the outcome I want if I keep doing what I'm doing. So let me go day by day. What can I do on Monday that'll set me up for more success? And if I do this every Monday of the month, then I'll like the outcome in 5 years, right? Same thing with Tuesday and then Wednesday, and I go on and so forth. And so then it just comes down to creating those routines. If I say to myself, like, well, every single day, I want to make sure that when I go to the gym, I'm focused, I'm present. Okay, I leave my iPhone at home and I have an iPod Touch or, whatever with me, and that's what I'm going to listen to. I'm not going to be distracted, nothing. Great. That's one thing that can make me better as a lifter. Maybe it's acting. Okay, I'm going to carve out this 1 hour time window where I'm going to focus purely on scripts. And then this 1 hour, I'm going to focus on accents. I'm going to do that every Tuesday. Those little things are what are going to compound and create wins later on. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, idealistically, and then there's also like the practical, like real life. Let me look at exactly what I'm doing now. If it's not going to get me where I want, then what do I need to change to do that?
That's great, man. I love the structure. My follow-up question is, how do you then balance curating this perfect version of yourself or your future self with who you truly are? Like how do you prevent that thing that you want to become from just being a character that you play in your day-to-day life? How do you build authenticity, I guess, in that? Or is that part of it? It's just like part of becoming my perfect self is ensuring that I have authenticity.
Well, it's funny because you said you wanted to ask a question about habits, but really this question is about that third cost, which is yourself. And I do believe that you will have to kill off pieces of yourself to make room for the new ones to grow. That's just it. You cannot possibly be someone who doesn't smoke cigarettes while also smoking cigarettes, right? That piece of you has to die. That's just an honest thing, right? We can all agree. So in a way, you are recreating yourself when you're doing this. So that is who you are. The core of who you are, like your soul, bro, that's what devised the plan. I mean, that's what that you literally came up with that vision. I didn't give you that vision. You came up with that vision. So you're doing exactly what you know you are capable of doing. Now, all of this extra shit, yeah, it might have to go. And if there's some things you don't want to part with, that's fine too. Remember, you created that vision. So just make sure you just erase that part because that's not going to be there if you don't change it, right? And it's as simple as that. I think we all kind of want to have the best of both worlds, but you don't get that. Now, I don't. I think where sometimes it can go wrong is you become obsessed with success in the sense of I have to be rich just to be rich. It's what society would expect of me. It's I have to have all the girls because that's what like that's where you can run into problems because is that what you want? Is that your desire? Is that what you truly believe is right? Or did you learn that from somebody and that's not actually what you want, right? And that's not actually what's right. And so you have to do some deep soul searching there. But no one is born perfect and no one is born in a state where they're super happy with themselves. You can love yourself without being happy with yourself. And I think hopefully that's really what answers your question. Look, man, like I think I love myself. I think I respect myself. If I say something, I really try and show up and do it, and I love myself enough to be accountable as well and say, hey, Gav, you're not as good as you could be. And so that makes room for, hey, let's adopt a new habit. Let's start journaling. You know, Coach Tom said you should start journaling. So start fucking journaling. And so that's to me that's a natural extension of somebody who loves themselves. You know, I don't know if that answers your question, but maybe it's a little harsh too. I don't know.
No, no,
But
no, 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 no. That's great, man. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. Just a pure answer from the heart. And like for you, you're extremely well spoken, and I want people to know that I didn't send you any of these questions in advance. This is like all straight off the top of Gavin's dome. I didn't even tell him what we were talking about. I just made him show up, and
yeah, I thought we were
uh,
going to talk about how poverty my deadlift is, and here I am talking about greatness.
all right, we got a few questions. There's always some uh, less than ideal questions. So I'm not going to ask them all. We got about 10 minutes, so I'll try and ask some decent ones. I'll start with a stupid one. This one says, "Who's the most handsome 120 kilo lifter?" The correct answer is Tank. I don't
Mm.
know what that means, but
Bro, you would love him, bro. He's coached by Josh Bryant, I think. But he
yeah,
squats like 804 for two, I think he hit. He just competed at NAPF.
nice, nice. All right, Patrick Belinsky, God bless him. He asked, "What's your favorite cigar combo and your favorite cigar?" What? And I don't know what a cigar combo is. What's a combo?
Yeah, so basically like what you would pair it with. So cigar combo, Diet Pepsi for sure, or Coke Zero easily. I don't eat when I smoke cigars. I think it's kind of gross. Um, Favorite cigar? Shit. I mean, there's a lot. I've been really enjoying these Julius Caesar ones, but to be honest with you, a Padron is like a dessert. That's always a go-to.
I don't know what any of that means, but nice. I like this one. I don't know if this is the same guy that asked it on Colton's, but I actually really like this question, which is what does a rest day look like for you? Like what are you doing on your days off of powerlifting?
Well, today was actually like a rest day. So basically, I wake up, I eat, I check some emails, get back to clients, and then I've been trying to keep up with some morning journaling. So I do that. And then the rest of my day is really just I have to fit in an hour of cardio or some form of cardio, basically, just to get my steps in because my fucking coach makes me get in 1,000 steps in a day. It's ridiculous. Could you believe it? So yeah, Thomas makes me get in a bunch of steps, so I have to get those steps in. So I carve out time for that, and then most of my day is honestly calls, or it's if I have like an audition that I have to prep for, I'll do that stuff. It's basically just work. It's literally just work, cardio, and that's basically it.
Awesome. What keeps you going when you don't feel like it or when you're tired?
Oh, you know, especially when it comes to like lifting stuff and all that, it's there's just a switch. Like once you decide and you've committed, it's there's no feeling it, not feeling it. There's no should I? It's not even a question. It's not even a decision anymore. We talked about when Thomas, who does coach me. I don't know if they know. They have to know that, right? That you coach me. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
Thomas Lilley coaches me. So he when he gave me he said this earlier in the podcast when he told me the shoes that would work for squats in the future that eliminated all the options. He gave me the choice, and I'm sure he was confident in my ability to make that choice. But him giving me that option eliminated all the others. In other words, you've decided, you've committed, it's done. So 9 times out of 10, whether I feel it or not, I'm doing it. It doesn't matter. I've committed to it. You just can't even let yourself get into that. But for the things that are like new habits or, I'm learning guitar or whatever the fuck, for that stuff, man, it's really hard. Sometimes it's quite literally just like, okay, this absolutely sucks, but I'm gonna force myself to do it for 5 minutes. And if I really don't want to do it after 5 minutes, I'll stop. But the big picture stuff, man, when it really gets hard, I think for me again, prayer is a really big one for me. and leaning on that, trusting him. Sometimes rejection is protection, man. It sucks to lose worlds. It sucks to lose competitions, to not make progress, to all this other shit. But I'm telling you, man, sometimes that stuff really does make you better if you choose for it to. Um, and then, bro, like, what the fuck is the alternative? You're gonna quit? You're gonna give up? And what? And do what? Like, genuinely think about it. Okay, so I'm gonna quit powerlifting. Now, what am I doing with my time? You know, you probably don't even have something better to do with your time. So you might as well just fucking go to the gym and get it done.
No, I love that, man. I love that. When let's say you're in the gym and you're having just like a shit session, deadlifts just aren't working, you keep dropping the bar, or there was a session in the last block where it just wasn't happening. You got pummeled by the conventional deadlifts. Is your brain like, well, I get to train, I'm still here, I can finish the session, I can get something out of it, or does your brain ever go basically what you just showed emotionally, which is just like, what the fuck else am I going to do? And that turns into then you access another gear and then go back and attack the set and get it. Like
Yeah, yeah.
what
And
normally happens in those moments?
so not immediately am I gratitude, do I have gratitude of like, man, this is a privilege, I get to do this. It's very easy to say that on a podcast, but in the moment, it's very difficult to feel that way, although that is part of it. Honestly, I've only
I
had
don't
a
think many people do, to be honest.
yeah, well, you know what, dude? It's strange because it really like nobody has a gun to my head saying that, hey, man, you have to go fucking deadlift, for 3 hours. Like nobody telling me I have to do that. So it is a choice, and it's sometimes it's easy to take that for granted. And I had a close friend of mine, short story, who basically was a motorcyclist, and he got hit really hard by a tractor trailer. It wasn't his fault. Somersaulted in the air, fractured everything, and had like a big ass comeback. Now he's stronger than he's ever been. Fucking awesome. His name is Danny Stachulek. So I say that story to say, here, why am I going to bitch about getting stapled by a deadlift when my boy had to come back from 2 years really of PT because he got into a bad accident? It's like, some people can't walk. Some people aren't even born with the ability to fucking deadlift. So, I'm not going to bitch about that. So I definitely do think that that's part of it. But I've had a few moments, man, where it's like, dude, you just feel like you're pushing up against a wall that just won't budge, and it makes you angry. It makes you sad. Like you tear up. You're like literally so angry with yourself. Why can't I figure this out? Why am I not good enough? All these things, and that's just time. That's an emotion. That's not the truth. The emotion is a signal. It's not a truth about anything. So you just gotta let that shit pass, and then I kind of use it as fuel. But dude, I'm old enough and mature enough in this sport now that like when that happens, I'm like, yeah, whatever. I'll be fine next week. We'll be good. So
Yeah. Yeah. My I call it toxic coaching because it's just like, it's not actually toxic. It's just kind of annoying because it's right. When people have a bad session or a bad competition, I'm like, cool, are you quitting powerlifting tomorrow? No? Okay, well, then there's going to be another session. There's going to be another competition. You're just going to keep showing up and get better. How do I know that? Because I've got these 5 years of data that show me that you do that. Like, and no one can really respond to that other than, yeah, okay, whatever. Um, I'm going to say this one, but I'm going to answer it for you, which is, what were the main reasons for changing your coach? And I'm going to say, go to Gavin's YouTube channel, subscribe while you're there. He actually made a bunch of videos about this. So, well, he made a main video when he returned to YouTube a couple of weeks ago. And now he talks about his training. And so there was another question around like, how's your training frequency, volume, intensity changed? Again, scrub through Gavin's training videos. They're really cool. Um, Last question, and then we'll probably have to cut it there, which is, when do you think will be the end for you in powerlifting, slash how many years do you have left?
it's a great question, dude, because I've thought about this a lot. I love training. I've always loved training. I've always loved pushing myself, seeing how far I can go. And I was training long before I had a competition to train for. So, that'll always be there. And I always have felt like, well, I want to train for something. Like I genuinely want to be the best. It doesn't make sense for me to squat if I'm not going to try and squat a world record. Like it's just how my mind works. And so like it gives me value. It gives my training value. So I think I'm young. Like what I've seen is most power lifters seem to peak strength wise, at least on the natural side. They seem to peak around like 33 to 35, and then it becomes a little bit more difficult for them to really try and get big strength gains after that. Not to say that they can't make progress. I've just seen it be a little bit more difficult. But dude, I've seen athletes beat some of the best 80, like Russ, best 83, lost to Jurgens. Jurgens was 38 when he beat Russ. So there's no excuses. So hypothetically, I've got at least a decade, but my goal has always been to become a two-weight class open world champion. So I want two belts. I would love to do it at 93 and 83. And and then win Sheffield, of course. But I don't like goals that are specific to a competition because there could be a day when Sheffield doesn't exist, and it's like it never really mattered. So I definitely want to cross the 1,000 kilo barrier, 100%. I was the first 93 on paper to go 900 or 901 technically for the 93s. I would love to be the first to cross 1,000. Obviously, want to dominate across the board, but yeah, those are like the objective goals. So.
You're never getting to 83. What are you gonna do? Chop a
Dog,
fucking leg off?
I'm chubby, man. I can do it.
Fuck that fucking hell. Just go 93 and 105. Get
Bro,
jacked. More
ah,
jacked than you
I'm
already
gonna be
are.
a meatball at 105, dog. I'm 5'5". Ugh.
Yeah, meatball that squats 450.
Yeah, not to death though.
All right, man. Depth is a frame of mind, man. It's not objective.
That's right.
It's in the head. All right. Thank you so much for your time, man. But before we close off, is there anything you want to say to the people? Like, is that someone listening to you? What's one sage bit of wisdom from your knowledge and experience in either life or lifting that you can pass on to the lifters out?
Hmm. If you're gonna take the island, burn the boats. God will steer, but you must row. Those two. That's what I'm gonna give you. Yeah.
Love it. Fucking love it, man. Thank you so much for your time, brother. It's always great catching up with you. And man, I'll see you in a few weeks when I'm over.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, brother.
All right.